particularly well timed. Just last week, Jim was nominated to another budget office, that is to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget. And believe me, this really is a coincidence. Congratulations on this well-deserved nomination, and welcome back to Washington. We are very proud of you, and we are very excited that you are going to take this very esteemed position. Congratulations. Now, as you all know, we are here today to honor his service as chairman of the House Budget Committee with the official portrait, which will be unveiled shortly. But first, I'd like to join some of Jim's closest friends and former colleagues in offering a few words of appreciation to our leader, our colleague, my mentor, and our friend. Jim, you may have noticed while walking through the halls of Congress that things are just a little bit different here these days from when you left. There's a lot more green from the other side on the board than there were red, so it's a little different. But what hasn't changed here in the halls of Congress is our commitment to achieving the goals you fought so hard for, not only as Budget Committee Chairman, but throughout your service in Congress. And that is to ensure that Americans continue to enjoy the greatest security, freedom, and opportunity in the world by ensuring that their government is as effective, efficient, and sensible as possible. Jim proved his commitment to this vision through his entire tenure here. Early on, for example, when his home district was devastated by floods, I remember this very vividly. He secured emergency funds to help his constituents recover, but he also insisted that Congress actually pay for that extra emergency spending by finding savings elsewhere. That is a notable stand for fiscal discipline, and it is so rarely seen here in Congress. Jim entered Congress as a fiscal conservative, a principled fiscal conservative, and he left it that way. He also demonstrated a great ability to work across the aisle and across the Capitol. One of these great examples is a leading example for us all is in creating the bipartisan bill to reform and improve the congressional budget process. Now, those of us that get into the budgety wonkety-wonk stuff, a budget process reform, many of us think this is exciting. Most of you probably do not. But sort of the hallmark, the beginning of budget process reform, the nirvana for us, was the kickstart of the Nussle budget process reform bill. And Jim Nussle worked with his Democratic colleague, our Democratic colleague at the time, now Senator Ben Cardin, to start off this movement toward budget process reform to where many of us are still trudging in those vineyards. Now, my own acquaintance with Jim is through our work on the House Budget Committee, where he is my chairman, but also on the House Ways and Means Committee. I come from Wisconsin, he comes from Iowa, we are kindred spirits, and we work very closely together on so many different issues, whether it's healthcare issues, Medicare issues, or, like I mentioned, the very exciting issue of budget process reform. Clearly, the dominating event in Jim's career as chairman, right at the beginning of his first term, was 9/11, a day that fundamentally and permanently changed our nation and the priorities for this Congress. Chairman Nussle suddenly found himself with the unenviable task of writing budgets that would not only continue to honor our myriad longstanding domestic commitments, but quickly and dramatically strengthen our nation's defenses and homeland security. In other words, we had a real budget crunch on our hands. 9/11 was a big curveball that was thrown to our country, not least of which thrown to the fiscal balance sheet of our nation. Jim understood what needed to be done, and he recognized that we needed to have a plan. He also understood that the budget was the right vehicle for that plan, a single document in which we could pull together under one umbrella all the things Congress needed to get done, set priorities to ensure our most pressing needs were addressed first, and then organize a comprehensive legislative to get it all done. He also gave it to us straight. Jim Nussle is so well known for being a straight talker, for being an honest person even when the truth isn't as comfortable as it otherwise could be. These are tough choices that we have to make when we budget. And he always knew that you can't make everybody happy, but the most important thing is to be square and honest with people. So he brought with him that Iowa good and common sense to Congress as chairman of the Budget Committee, and I know he'll bring that kind of good Iowa common sense as director of the Office of Management and Budget. Finally, and dearest to my heart, Jim was also instrumental in getting Congress not only to begin a real discussion on the need to reform entitlements, but to act. In his last term in office, Jim was able to get through Congress for the first time in nearly a decade to begin to reform on our nation's largest and least sustainable entitlement programs. He, for the first time in a decade, passed through actual reconciled savings on entitlements, a budget, the DRA. And that is a very important achievement for those of us who care a lot about budgets, who care a lot about making sure that our fiscal ship of state is righted. In a nutshell, Jim Nussle led the Budget Committee honorably, with respect, commitment, determination, and conviction, and he always had a plan. Today, our nation is stronger and safer and more prosperous and resilient because of that. At this time, I would like to welcome our chairman of the House Budget Committee.
I had a hard time getting out of that.
I always pause a little bit when that happens. Jim Nussle and John Spratt got along very well. I enjoyed watching it, and the example that I try to follow in being on the other side of the issue, but being respectful and agreeable personally, is that the example Jim Nussle set for me. At this time, I am grateful to be able to carry on that relationship with my good friend and my chairman, Chairman John Spratt. Jen, would you please